Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. Is there anyone else present that plans to record? Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We have a action-packed agenda, so we're going to get going right away. Our first item of business is approval of our minutes from our last meeting on January 22nd. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, any comments, corrections? Okay. All in favor of approving the minute? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? 4-0. All right, next up, we will hear from our Chelmsford High School representative.
There will be a half day for all schools tomorrow, and the mentors will be meeting with their freshman mentees on Thursday. Scheduling for underclassmen will take place this week with the guidance staff for all underclassmen. 8th grade, or the class of 2023, parents have an informational meeting on this Thursday at 7 in the PAC. Night Sounds will be held on next Wednesday the 13th in the Black Box Theater. February break is coming up on February 18th through 22nd. And finally, the Town of Chelmsford scholarships for seniors will be due on February 15th, not March 15th, as previously said in the handout given to seniors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any good news?
I have a full sheet of
Okay, that's great.
So sit down and get ready. Okay, so I'm going to make a correction though first. So Sharon, you probably want to take note of this, although I'm going to turn it into good news. So on the January 22nd meeting, I talked about the arrival of the Fulbright T Scholars. They actually arrived on the 31st. That was our orientation. That happened on the 24th, so I was a little ahead of the game. But they had their first full day at CHS this past Monday, and there was an incredible welcome from staff and students in our Performing Arts Center. There was dancing, there was singing, there was we got a presentation of gifts. So if you recall, when Mr. Atchison was here talking about his experience when he went abroad to India, he talked about the welcome he had. I cannot remember the phrase he had, but he talked about that, and he wanted the same here. So he got together with the other host teachers, and they did an incredible job. So we're looking forward to having them for the next 6 weeks, now down to 5 weeks, but and they'll be here on March 5th for our school committee meeting, and I believe all 24 of them are coming from all the districts. So there's a total of 24 in 4 different districts. Okay. And then also at that meeting, I talked a little bit about Clint Smith. He came to CHS this past January on the 28th, and he performed his poetry in front of 500 CHS students, plus visitors from Burlington High School and throughout the Chelmsford community. His visit was in conjunction with the Chelmsford Public Library's REACT grant, which stands for Read, Engage, and Come Together. The grant is centered on issues of education, social justice, civic engagement, and Mr. Smith was introduced on the stage by 2 of the CHS students, Emily Riand and Marietta Arkillian, and they're the co-presidents of the CHS Poet Society. And good news internally for us, one of our department coordinators, you know her well, Christina Whittlesey, she just successfully defended her dissertation yesterday, and that was at UMass Lowell, and she will be graduating this May with her PhD in education. So congratulations to our almost Dr. Whittlesey. And tomorrow is a professional development day, and I just wanted to highlight one of the sessions. There's going to be a joint session with our social studies and our science K-4 teachers, and they're going to be learning a little bit more about inquiry-based learning methods that they can apply both to science and to social studies, and quite honestly, you can apply it to most of your content areas. And I just wanted to thank 2 of our coordinators, John Morris, our science coordinator, and Stephanie Quinn, our coordinator for history and social science, for combining their efforts and being able to provide this PD for the teachers. And tonight, our unified PE students are playing with other students from Billerica at the halftime. So we're all here, but we wish our students luck. So they're excited for that game tonight. It's at the boys' basketball game. The Taste of Chelmsford was held, and as usual, it's a hit. Don't have to tell you a little bit more about that. Lots of great food and lots of, good excitement there. And then last Wednesday at the Harrington Elementary School, they had their Heritage Festival. I want to thank Justin Thorne. She invited Dr. Lang and myself. We attended. Also in attendance was Kelly Rogers. She's the reading, Title I, ELL department coordinator, and she was there to help celebrate all the diversity that's happening in Chelmsford and through this event. And this event had games, it had dancing, there was food, and I have a fun fact for you. There are 54 languages spoken by students and families in the Chelmsford Public Schools. So, that's it.
Right. Okay, anybody else have any good news? Okay. All right. Good.
Glad to check it off.
All right. All right, moving on. We're now to our public comment portion of our meeting. If anyone would like to come and speak to the committee about any of the items on tonight's agenda, please come forward and state your name and address for the recording secretary. Nope? Okay. All right, moving on to new business then.
Great. We actually have a few presentations this evening, but we'll jump right into our first one. So continuing with our spotlight on the schools, this is Parker Middle School's night to come forward and present. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Parks and a couple of students and staff from the Parker School and turn it over to him to hear a little bit about the happenings this year at Parker Middle School.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. It's nice to be back. As we begin, I'd just like to quickly introduce a couple of the Parker superstars I brought along with us. There's 8th grader Ella Parks, who's also on our Student Pride Committee. 7th grader Mary Cohane, who's also a student rep on our Pride Committee. And Ashley Jean is a 7th grade Ancient Civilizations teacher. And they were asking, please bring us to the school committee so we can help talk to people. So no, I really appreciate them stepping up, because as you know, getting up in front of an audience isn't always easy. So I really appreciate them coming to do this with me. So we have 4 areas that we're going to be highlighting for you tonight. The homework survey, if you remember back last May when we came, this was a thing that we were currently working on, and the students were actually in the process of collecting, summarizing the data, and had prepared presentations that they were going to deliver to the staff. So I figured it would be good for us to jump right in, and I could give you an update on that. I brought a packet of each of the 4 presentations by grade level for each of the committee members, and Dr. Lang and Dr. Hirsch, so you can take a look at that. We're also Ashley's going to talk a little bit about what the teachers have been working on at Parker. Ella and Mary will talk about a Pride Committee update, and then we'll wrap it up and let you know the things that we're excited about that are right around the corner at Parker. So the homework survey, this was a product of our students last year deciding that they wanted to take on a challenge within the school. And what they said they wanted to focus on was homework and getting a better idea of how the kids in all 4 grades feel about homework, and generally gathering some feedback and being able to share that with staff. So as I said last May, we had met with you folks, and after that, our students went and met with each grade level, including the special educators, and they did these presentations and really just delivered the feedback to the teachers, created nice summaries, which you'll see, but also just delivered, here are some of the comments that the students are making. And this is something that as a school we want to get together around to make sure that the homework that we're giving is purposeful and that everyone's mindful about the quality and quantity of the assignments that the kids are getting. So a couple of the key takeaways that we found that we thought were very helpful, and I wanted to highlight a couple of them tonight. One of the things, and we do see this happening throughout the course of this school year, is the kids ask the teachers to please work to communicate. So all teachers on, let's say, a 4-person team within the upper grade levels, or the 2-person teams in the 5th and 6th grade. So they're not giving major assignments or a couple of tests on the same day. It's something that I think as the teachers kind of stepped back and looked at, they said, okay, well, we can do that. And so I know at least in a couple of the grade levels now, they're using a common calendar so they can see if they want to give a test on Thursday, they already have something, so let me move it to a different day. And I think that internal communication has been very helpful so far this year. Reducing homework on school-sponsored events, I'm grateful that the kids kind of brought this up, because we'll do family nights, and we have a play, and we have all this fun stuff going on, and we want kids and families to come, but then we're hearing, I have too much homework, I can't go. So that's on us. And so for us to take a step back and look at what are we doing on the school-sponsored event nights to be able to kind of boost attendance and make sure that all kids can participate. Knowing the assignments in advance, that's something that the 5th and 6th grade teachers, I think that's very common, but looking to, as the kids get more and more used to that, as they move up into the other grade levels, is that something that we can carry on in the upper grades so they have a snapshot of the week, and it helps them practice their own time management. And then the last, I thought this was very interesting, and I'm planning at an upcoming staff meeting to do an exercise around this, is to look at how long do the teachers think it takes a student to complete an assignment, and how long does it actually take when the student sits down at home to complete the assignment, and how close are those numbers for what they think it's going to take a student versus what it really means when the student is sitting at home with that and all the other things that they're managing. So those are 4 key takeaways, and there's other great information in these packets that I'll leave with you. So now I'd like to turn over to Ms. Jean, who's going to talk a little bit about what our teachers have been working on this year.
Hi. So I've been on the Parker PBIS committee for a couple of years now. And the first thing that we did when we started working together was to work on a hallway initiative, because we feel that it's an area that connects everyone in the school, literally and figuratively. So we started with things like stay on the right side and keep your eyes facing forward so that you're safe. And if you're walking by a classroom that's learning, try to be on the quieter side. So that went really well. So now we're kind of in the next stages of what we're going to do as a committee. So we've been doing things like going to professional development days. We've been working together as a committee as well as organizing ones for the Parker staff, so it's been great. And our goal really is to model positive behavior and just encourage students to do that as well. So our goals for this year is to merge the Pride initiative with our PBIS initiative. We've been working with Kate Regal, who's the hired consultant, as well as Eric Mann. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, I can show you. Thank you. So this is an expectations matrix that we've been working on. The goal is really to show kids this is how to behave like a role model. So what we did was we kind of know that it looks different in every area of the school when you're showing pride. So what we did was we wanted to clearly define what pride really means, so they know what each letter of the acronym stands for, and kind of define what each area of the school would look like, because it does look different in a classroom versus in the hallway versus at lunch versus on the bus. So we had a blank matrix, and in the October Professional Development Day, we actually divided the entire Parker staff into separate groups, teachers and paraprofessionals, to work together to define what each area would really look like. So that's what we did in October, and we've been kind of defining it more clearly as a committee. And tomorrow, during the Professional Development Day, we're actually going to be making lesson plans so that we can teach these to the kids. So what we really want them to see as positive behavior. If you don't mind going to the next one too. Thank you. Is there like a signal?
Just give me a nod. I'm all in.
Thank you. So our committee is actually organized into 3 different subcommittees as well. So as you know, there's 3 different stipend positions at Parker, and so we each kind of taken a role on one of these subcommittees. So Building Connections is being run by Linda Jowett, who is a phys ed teacher at Parker. And the goal with that is to really get students to feel connected to Parker and the staff and the students, so they're feeling safe when they come to school. For the first 3 days this year, we actually did not dive into any lessons or classroom rules. We spent 3 days just getting to know the kids that were going to be in our classroom. And I think it went great. What do you guys? Hopefully great. So we want to do things like that so that you're really just kind of getting to know your school and everyone feels safe and like they have a place at Parker. So that committee has been working on that, as well as doing a staff snowball activity where we got to know each other a little bit better. And the executive functioning committee is being run by Paul Wing, who is a 7th grade math teacher. And they're working on scaffolding organization skills. So basically teaching kids how to be organized and advocate for themselves. So they did a staff survey, and they're working on kind of reworking on our reminder binder to make sure that it's teaching kids those organizational skills. And then the mindfulness committee is the one that I'm on. And we're working on teaching kids how to be present and engaged throughout the day. And we also did a staff survey to kind of see where people were at, what people were interested in working on and using with their students. And we also did a little newsletter around vacation, because it can be a little bit stressful around the holidays. So we were just kind of saying, like, this is a way to stay mindful with your family and friends. So these committees are run by PBIS committee members as well as other staff members who volunteer throughout the school. So we've gone to workshops, we've been working together, and we'll kind of roll out this initiative a little bit more next year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ellen and Mary, who are going to talk about our amazing Pride Committee.
Okay, so this is the conference that we went to, the Pride Committee, called MIAA, and I won't go into too much detail because Ella will be talking about that in a few minutes. So, yeah. Okay, so these are the students that are on the Pride Committee. We were nominated as sixth graders to show like leadership and to be good examples to like the younger kids, to like make sure that they're being like nice to each other and to show leadership. And there's 10 eighth graders and 10 seventh graders in this committee.
Okay, so the picture from the conference we went to in October, so we were given the task of coming up with ideas and we could use in our school. So the committee, we divided into 3 subcommittees: the courtyard committee and the school store, and then the leadership committee, which me and Mary are a part of. And yeah, the leadership committee, we wanted to go visit the elementary schools and talk to the 3rd graders about what it means to be a leader in their school and in their communities around them. And so we came up with some fun activities we can do with them and teach them how to be leaders and stuff. Yeah.
And then this is our Pride Week, which is next week. And every day we go to the classrooms and talk about what Pride stands for, what P, R, I, and D and E are. And on Friday, right before vacation, there are 2 Pride rallies, 12 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. So if you guys aren't busy, please come and stop by to see what's going on and how much fun we are having.
So we have a lot of, thank you guys. We have a lot of student and staff activities during the Pride Rally. So if you are able, it is absolutely amazing. Bring your sneakers. We might throw you into a game because we're probably going to need some help. So all these things that the girls were just talking about have just been fun ways for us to really kind of connect and celebrate as a staff. I'd also like to, what Ella was talking about, the elementary principals came over and met with our Pride Committee, and the students gave them a proposal and said, we'd like to come and talk to your 3rd graders, and the elementary principals were very receptive, and so we're going to work out a timeline for us to be able to go there and talk to them. And then between now and the next couple of months, we have a couple of pretty exciting things happening. So this weekend is our annual school play. This year it's Alice in Wonderland Jr. Friday and Saturday, 7 p.m., and then 2:30 is the Meet the Cast performance that they do, the matinee. So as always, and I know you've seen, all of you have seen other productions from all different grade levels. It's absolutely fascinating, and it blows you away how talented these students are. Speaking of which, we have our talent show on March 8th, which is always a lot of fun. It's been a wonderful annual event for our school. And even last year, we had a special guest appearance by Dr. Lang. So I typically don't know who the guest stars are going to be, so it's a lot of fun to wait and kind of see what's going to happen with that as well. So we're looking forward to that. But if you're able, and I know, part of the reason why everybody works so hard for the district is so you can enjoy those type of things. So I would encourage you to try to come out and catch something if you can. That'd be great. And then, finally, on behalf of the Pride Committee, the reps, the students, and the staff, just, thank you for having us. We really appreciate your ongoing support and giving us the annual opportunity to come out and check in and show off what's happening at the school.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
That was very nice. Yeah, very nice. Nice job,
Can I
girls.
just ask one?
Yeah.
Can you just talk for a second about, I do think it's a great idea to go down to the elementary schools and talk a little bit about what the committee's going to be like. Can you just talk a little bit about why you'd be targeting 3rd grade?
So we said we'd be talking to the 3rd graders so we were going to talk to them in May, towards the end of the year, because they're going to be the leaders in their school next year, going into 4th grade. So we thought it would be great to talk to them because they can bring those skills into 4th grade with them and then into the middle schools and even high school.
Okay, thank you.
Now, last year or last May, you brought us the homework survey and everything. You have the results tonight. Any new initiatives? Any new things you're looking into in a similar vein, or?
Not necessarily around homework right now. We're still looking at, what we did gain from it. Like I had mentioned, some common calendars. I'd like to see the things that are working for teachers and students this year to be kind of duplicated in other areas. So really just kind of watching based on the feedback that we got. You know, with this group working with the younger students, and then really the stuff that Ashley was talking about, and you know, helping to create a safe and supportive environment. And I know, you know, I've been watching the other meetings where other principals have come. Not scouting or anything, just watching because I'm interested.
Taking notes.
But you know, you guys, you certainly see common themes going throughout the other schools as well. So we want to make sure that we're consistent with that too. And as far as the homework, if I just, real quick, I like to look at also not only what did the teachers gain from it, but the students who came up with that idea last year, they got to see just how complex it is to develop a survey, administer, gather the information. They did some quantitative and qualitative data analysis, put together the presentations, went back to the teacher. So I think that learning experience in itself is super valuable too. So outside of the information we gain, just the skills that the kids gain by being a part of it is tremendous.
That's great. John?
Just on the talent show, is it just students participating?
It's a mix.
Okay.
Primarily
All right.
students, and what they asked this year was that the students who, any staff members that participate, that they have an act with students involved.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yep.
If you were going to ask your principal to participate.
I always play the role of supportive audience member.
Front and center right there.
That's key.
Yes, it is key, thank you.
There you go.
Thanks.
Somebody's got to clap.
That's right.
Somebody's
That's
gonna
right, clap and cheer. That's it.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you
And
very
My
much.
pleasure, thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, I'm going to see him this later on this week. Perfect. All right.
Next.
Thank you, Parker. Our next presentation this evening is our Chelmsford CPAC.
Same thing, I could be there. So again, I'm their human clicker, so.
Yeah, so
I need
we
a
have your
nod.
presentation
What's that?
loaded up for
Yeah,
you.
we'll nod her.
And
flag.
Linda will help advance the slides. You just give her the nod, and she'll put them through for you. But Ally, welcome, and CPAC members, I'll let you introduce yourselves and begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. First thing I'm going to say is that we are definitely going to take less time. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Less time than we did last year. Brevity is not my strong suit, but we're all gonna do our best. And I want to thank you for having us tonight. To just do introductions to start, I'm Kristen Erickson. I'm the co-chair.
Allison Barnes, another co-chair. I'm Amy Domo, and I am the workshop coordinator for CPAC.
I'm Jamie Dillon, and I chaired the Needs Assessment Survey Committee.
So just to get started, we will just flip right away. Basically, the things that we want to talk about today are what we did in this past year, talk about the survey, and then our goals for next year. Our slides are very packed with a lot of information, and I'm not just going to read it. We're going to try very hard not to, because they are going to be posted. I don't know if they're on
They're
their
on the
public
website,
record
yeah.
anyway, and they'll be on our website, so people can go there to get all the detailed information that they need. But basically, you know, we're going to start just with what we did and then what we want to propose for next year. And you can go on to the next one. One of the things that we did in this past year was go over and review our bylaws and update them. And when we did, we came up with our mission. It might have been the same anyway, but our mission is to effectively communicate the understanding, respect, and support of all children with special education needs in our community. And we have 6 duties that we came up with out of that, and that's to advise. I'm just going to start with just the verbs. Advise, collaborate, help, participate in planning, disseminate information, and inform parents. And I want to partly just point out that we found it hard even to know what our role is. And I think some people think that our role is to be an advocate or to be the person to come to if you have a problem, and that's not what our role is, and we do know that. And to that end, we wanted to make sure that we have the resources that we need, that at every meeting we have guest speakers to give out information, to have a resource library that we can pass on to families, and that we have things that are interesting to them. But then it's also a business meeting that has a lot of the same, you know, you have to have your posted notes and you have to have open meeting laws. So we've had a ton of work in all these areas, but we are not advocates, and we do try to make sure we tell that to the family so that they know we can point them in the right direction. But all of us have the same goal in different roles, but related to how the schools work and want the best for all of our children. Ours is a little bit more personal, and we don't think about the budget, and we know that you guys think about the budget, and we don't think about the staffing and all those other things. But the bottom line is that we are that extra piece that's required for the families that need a little extra help and support. So we can go on with that. Our budget from last year, this is just a breakdown of, it didn't come out. The lines got skewed there, but basically we had a $750 budget, and pretty much it's gone. What we have left over right now is $221, which is going towards our next planned workshop through the Federation, which is going to be about 5:04 meetings. You can stop and ask me questions if you have to, or you can always wait till the end, whatever you guys want to do. I'll go on to the, yes?
Sure. Are you building a database of advocates' names for people to?
We don't do that at all. Sometimes we know of some, but usually it's more of a referring to the Federation for a referral.
Parents are looking for an advocate. Where would you point them?
Typically, we'd point them to the Federation because they have a referral service.
Okay.
Or if anyone had, sometimes people will say they know this certain advocate or whatever, but we don't.
Okay.
We don't. That's not what we do. Yep. So as far as our goals and accomplishments that we have done, we've really done a ton of things. And the biggest thing in the beginning that we said last year was we wanted to exist. And then this year we wanted to get out there. And I think we've done a really good job of that. We've been at the open houses. We hosted a True Colors workshop with a lot of you. That was fun. We're hoping to have an Apple Institute training, but we haven't heard any information about that coming up yet. And we've really reached out to the schools with the Zendens and the other things that we've had. We did establish our guidelines for meetings and reached out to the PTA and BSA. And then if you go on to the next, this goes into a little more detail of, I want to give special credit where credit is due, and Mary Ellen Forty is one of the CHIPS preschool teachers, and she set up welcome packets for all the parents. That's when the parents first come into the school system, and if they're going to need some special ed support or just even thinking about it, they get a nice little bag that she put together for them. And then we've done a lot of, like I said, the Zenden, and we were at the Heritage Festival as well. Different things to help support in the community itself. And one of the things that they'll talk about in the survey also is that sometimes some of the parents can't come to our meetings because of lots of things, and we've changed the times of our meetings and the days of our meetings to help with that, because we were on Tuesday nights when you guys have meetings. And we were able to fortunately find babysitting that we can have the woman that runs the early childhood at the high school bring some of her students, and they have to have a certain amount of hours, and they're there right where we are, so it's not like your children are far away, but you can bring your children there so that you can be there for the meeting. And we try to structure the meeting that we have, this goes into the next slide, but it doesn't matter. The meetings start at 7, but we're there available, pretty much Ally and I, from 6 to 7 for parents before the meeting for more casual talking if they have anything they want to talk about. And we are able to provide that babysitting so they can be there. And we have speakers a lot at our meetings, and we have that at the beginning so that they don't have to stay for the more mundane things at the end of the meeting. So that goes on to the next slide, some of the trainings that we did have and that we are also going to have upcoming. We had the basic rights, which we'll have every year. We also had a training on IEPs next month, or in a couple of months. When is 504? In the spring sometime. And we're going to have a training on executive functioning and on anxiety at an upcoming meeting. And I kind of already talked about this as far as some of the guest speakers that we've had. We had some of the resource offices to talk about the ALICE trainings related to special ed children. Lifelinks, the Board of Health came with someone from Project Interface to talk about getting referrals for that. And then our one coming up at our next meeting is going to be the health and guidance counselors talking about mental health supports in schools. That's me for now, and then I'm going to pass off and they're going to talk about the survey.
All right, so I'm Jamie, and for the needs assessment survey, I worked with Bill Silver and Amy Reese to determine the survey tool that we would use, as well as the list criteria that the survey would actually be sent to. And all families that received the survey were able to access 3 specific topics. So that was general, CPAC, and evaluation and eligibility. but parents were then able to choose which topics they could then branch off to. What that means, though, is that even though there was 227 contacts that completed the survey, not every person answered every question for every topic. The additional topics that were offered to families were IEP services and accommodations, 504 plans, student services, sped transportation, and out-of-district and collaborative placements. And if families did choose to complete the survey for multiple children, they didn't have to complete the full survey. They only had to complete information that they already hadn't filled out. Conducting an anonymous survey like this really gives families in the district an opportunity to voice and share things that they may not necessarily feel comfortable sharing. The survey results also help CPAC as well as the district learn what is working well and what may not be working so well. We do plan to do a survey like this again in 2 to 3 years so that families can continue to have a voice and share concerns or good things.
So I'm going to take the next couple of slides and talk to you about some of the data that we collected. So this first slide, data-wise, talks about the demographics. So that first slide on the left covers the respondents' age of their child. So you can see the biggest portion is the red, which is elementary school, and then that's followed by the yellowish color, which is middle school, the green is high school, and then the blue is preschool, and then that little piece at the very top is students that are 18 to 22. That top right graph looks at ascertains data on whether people took it for more than one child. So we encouraged respondents, if they had, say, a child on an IEP and also a 504, to respond to both. So the majority just responded for one child. And then this next slide looks at, particularly related to 504 plans and their belief in is their child's 504 plan being, accommodations being used as written. So respondents were asked to rate their feelings on that from strongly disagree, whether they were neutral about it, agree, or strongly agree.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So those, of those 25% that strongly disagree, did you get actual responses onto what they felt the issues were or what wasn't being followed? Or was it just a kind of a check?
It was just a rating. There was opportunity at the end of the survey to give more specific data if they so chose.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So this next graph looks at who skips to 504s and who someone might know to contact at the school if they had a concern about that. So.
If I'm going too fast, let me know.
Love it.
Go back to that.
So 67.9 knew who to contact, but 32.1 didn't. And we felt like part of this could be when you have a child on an IEP, you have a designated team, and it's very clear. There's a liaison who would interface with you as a parent. When you have a child on a 504, that is not as clear.
Can I ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean children who are already on a 504, or like a parent wouldn't know who to contact if they wanted a 504?
If they were already on a 504. So if you had an issue with that 504, who would you contact at the school level?
All right. So these are just some highlights of families with students with 504 plans in place. And I do just want to note one thing. There's a typo on this slide that we weren't able to correct in time for the meeting. So where the second bullet, that is actually 56% of families rather than the 84%. So.
Which line?
Second bullet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's not
The second or third?
Oh yeah, third. Sorry.
Okay.
It's the third. Third bullet, where it says 84%. That one is actually 56%. So 70% of families were happy with the modifications that are in place for their child, and 57% of families felt that they were being actively included by their school's 504 plan team. 36% of families were not satisfied with the overall communication they had with the 504 plan team. And we do have a recommendation on that later in the presentation, but it may also be linked to, what Amy was referring to in terms of not having the same level of team that you would if you had an IEP.
So this next slide details whether parents are receiving communication regarding their child's progress relative to their IEP goals. And 79% responded yes, and 21% responded no. This next slide looks at parents' rating of whether their child is making effective progress relative to their IEP goals. So the green portion on the right is designated as yes, that their child is making progress on all goals, and that was 39%. The blue portion is their child is making progress on some goals, which was 57%. And then that slice up in the middle, which is yellow, is 4%, which is no, my child is not making progress on any goals. This next slide details how long a respondent's child has been on an IEP. So the majority of parents have had a child on an IEP for greater than 2 years. So this just gives, I think, some credence to families who filled it out that they've had experience with multiple IEPs.
Something that many families of children with special needs frequently are worrying about is whether their child is accepted as in the schools by their peers, by their teachers, and others. And throughout the survey, in general, we saw that many of the families all said that their child was accepted, and that's awesome. But to really see that almost every family that completed the survey, whether they were on an IEP or 504 plan, they really felt that their child was an accepted member of the school community, which is something that I think a lot of people should feel good about and satisfy people's nerves about that for their children. 22% of the families that did take the survey seemed dissatisfied with the overall communication and response times from their IEP team members. And just for those that may not be familiar with what an IEP team looks like, it can vary, but it typically would include a team chairperson from the Student Services Department assigned by school, a special education liaison, a general ed classroom teacher if their child is placed in the gen ed classroom, and related service providers such as SLPs, OTs, and PTs, as well as others as needed.
So this next graph was responded to by parents with children who are out of district, and whether they felt the district worked collaboratively with them to decide on that placement. So you'll see that if you combine the disagreements, they totaled are 37.6, and then the agreements are also 37.6 with 25% responding as neutral.
So for the out-of-district families, 37.5% of the folks that responded were not aware of any parent-led organizations or CPAC groups that are being offered by their out-of-district placement. So the CPAC group is of help to those families for sure. And families did share that they would be interested in getting more guidance from the district on after-school enrichment activities and sports options within their homeschools community. And they also shared some workshops that would be helpful for them that are in the slide.
So this next slide talks about parent satisfaction relative to support they receive from student services. And I have to apologize, this graph, the access only goes up to 40%, and it really should go up to to 100, so it's in line with all the other ones. I didn't realize it until earlier this evening, but at any rate, combined 45% of parents disagree with this statement, and 21.4 made some statement of agreement with 33% having a neutral statement of satisfaction of support that they received from student services. And I just wanted to call to your attention that the number of responses is 42. Just before this on the survey, there was a question asking if respondents had had occasion to contact student services. So if they didn't, obviously, that's where it stopped, and they did not answer this question.
Was this the most answered question? I mean, I saw on the last slide it was only 16 responded.
That was because of the out-of-district.
Oh, okay, so there are
yeah,
fewer
so
out-of-district.
fewer number, yeah.
On what slide would you say is 42 the, you know, what's the average? How many people responded overall in any way?
I think for IEPs in general, we were at 160-something responses.
Excellent.
And 504 was about 55, I believe.
Perfect. Thank you.
So this next slide, and you'll see the scale on this one is 100, asks about student service team members if they advocated for their child relative to their IEP. And again, the responses are 42. So just about 50% disagreed with the statement. 16.6 agreed with the statement, with 33 feeling neutral about the statement.
So about 80% of families that have students on an IEP or 504 plan felt that their related service providers, which again are SLPs or speech and language pathologists, for those that might not know the abbreviation, occupational therapists and physical therapists are doing a great job with their children. So that's really good to hear. For those that do not know, you know, the Student Services Department, it consists of the Director of Student Services, the administrative team chairpersons, and the Assistant Director of Student Services, as well as out-of-district coordinator and support staff. And something that we did see in the data was that 25% of the families that completed the survey that have had to contact the Student Services Department with a question or concern regarding their child's IEP that wasn't handled by their liaison. Of that 25%, 1/3 of them were satisfied, 1/3 were neutral, and 1/3 were dissatisfied on receiving responses in a timely manner. And I do just want to mention again, similar to what Amy had shared before, is that it's a subset of a subset, because not everybody answered the question, and like I said, only 25% have actually had to contact that department. And for transportation, 73% of families are experiencing inconsistent pickup and drop-off times. Transportation timing for all students is obviously important, but it's especially important for this population for many reasons. We do have a recommendation on this concern towards the end of the presentation, since it was so high.
This next graph details parents' ability to attend CPAC meetings, and Kristen talked a little bit about this earlier, but the most commonly given, or checked reason, I should say, was lack of time, followed by meetings being in an inconvenient time, and lack of childcare, which, as Kristen mentioned, we have put in measures to hopefully ameliorate some of that through the coordination with the Early Childhood Explorations Program. And then this next slide details parent interest for future workshops. And parents were most interested in workshops surrounding parent support, IEP and 504 plans, basic rights and laws, ADHD and executive functioning, and behavior. We have at our disposal and access to many great presentations through the Federation for Special Needs. So we, that's who did our basic rights and our IEP one, and we'll be hosting a 504 one in the spring. And we also have 2 guest speakers coming to talk about executive functioning.
All right, something I just wanted to mention, because I think we've talked about it a few times, but the babysitting that is being offered is actually free. So I just want to make sure that people that maybe aren't seeing the slides at home or something, that's something that is really cool, and many groups aren't able to provide that. So something to take advantage of. So let's talk a little bit about some of our recommendations based on some concerns that we saw in the survey data. So there are families that feel that wait times to receive responses from the Student Services Department as well as their IEP teams could be improved. When questions or concerns are resolved in a timely manner, the trust in the district goes up, so that's a plus, obviously. Families don't always know what to do or who to talk to for their questions or concerns, and our recommendation would be to develop and enforce clear communication guidelines. In terms of 504 plans, the responses indicated that there are 504 plans that are not being implemented as written, and there are families that don't know who to contact at the school for issues like these in particular. We recommend that the district create a flow chart for each school, outlining the school's hierarchy of team members responsible for implementing those 504 plans. And this flow chart could then be handed out at the 504 plan meetings, CPAC meetings, and be available on the district as well as the CPAC websites. And to see that almost 3/4 of the families that are utilizing the special education transportation are experiencing those inconsistent pickup and drop-off times, which are really important to have consistent, as well as other issues, we strongly believe that the families need a specific district transportation contact. And there have been names mentioned in the past, but not clearly defined, as well as protocols for family members to be able to follow. And this is a recommendation, as well as the others, that we hope to discuss further when evaluating and planning with the district.
Can I ask one question on that one? Did the survey at all distinguish, or is there any way to kind of call out the data on the transportation issue with regard to, are these concerns regarding in-district special ed transportation, or like the out-of-district, kids who are in out-of-district placements that we're transporting, say, out of the town?
It wasn't broken out to that extent. It was just simply families that are utilizing the special ed transportation.
Either in or out of district?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does the director of transportation, would that be their contact? Would he be the contact for special education transportation as well as general?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, most of the special ed transportation is actually coordinated through the special ed office. The bigger issue becomes, as far as like if someone has a complaint or concern, anyone, whether it's regular ed or special ed, can go to the website and do the bus icon to actually file their complaint. That's the quickest and easiest way to kind of register a complaint, and that then actually gets emailed to all applicable parties behind the scenes. So like the transportation company gets the email, our staff gets the email, it's then logged as well, so it can be documented and followed up on. We could come up with some kind of a cheat sheet almost for parents to be able to just say who to contact, how to contact people, if you think that'd be helpful. That's a quick and easy way of doing it. But most of the special ed transportation is, again, it's student-specific, depending on what they need. So the special ed people in their office actually manage that. Peter really does the regular ed big bus transportation.
Is it okay if I just say something back?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So we did ask a question about whether or not families knew about that form on the website as well, and the majority did not. So that's also another opportunity just to clearly be able to communicate to families that that's out there. But I will say that there has been feedback at the CPAC meetings that they have been told not to use that form because it just gets emailed anyways, and there's a lot of feedback that's been shared about using that form and whether it's actually the right process to use or to take.
If that form is used by a special education parent, their response most likely would come from someone in student services.
Or it goes to the transportation company as well. So like the liaison at the transportation company gets that email as well, and they oftentimes respond to the emails.
What should be the anticipated response? 24 hours?
Again, a lot of it just depends on like the issue. If there's a critical issue with the child, yeah, it's within that afternoon, even the next day. If someone just puts in a generic request type thing, that can take a couple of days to get back to.
Have you ever
but
seen
I
a
definitely
generic
would use-
request about transportation?
Yeah, no, it does, it does happen.
Yeah, it's emotional.
Yeah, but there are some like non-emotional, like people will put just generic kind of questions through that form also, not really recognizing even that it's just the transportation kind of report an issue type form. So again, that is something we can push out. That is, I don't know what the feedback you're getting at CPAC, like that is a good form to use. But we can have an
And
offline conversation
I will just say
about
that I called, and Peter told me that it was not the right way, and I was then told to call directly to Student Services, which is what I did.
Yeah, Peter may have fielded the call.
Yeah.
But Peter would deal with just the regular ed transportation issue. It is also going to.
Well, right, I mean the form, I said it wrong, but I think I don't know, you know, that one of the people that happened to was me, and in using the form, I was told, well, don't use the form, just go directly through Student Services, which it doesn't matter how I do it, or anybody does it, as long as everybody knows how to do it.
Well, it sounds like then we just need to get some clarification. Whether
So
or not.
when your child was provided services, did you receive some kind of information packet?
About transportation or about?
Student services, the Department of Student Services, and the things that should be, would be, could be provided to you?
No, and that packet that they're using at CHIPS that Mary Ellen put together is amazing, and not every family enters through CHIPS though.
Right,
Some
right.
people enter at elementary,
Yep.
middle school, et cetera. So something like that would probably be useful across the board.
Okay.
Can we get a copy of that packet for the?
From CHIPS?
Yeah. I'd
think
like to
so,
see what it looks
sure.
like.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. All right. So the next two slides kind of go over things that are ongoing. So they're things that we've either already talked about, are working on, or would like to address. This slide focuses a lot on recommendations based on making sure parents are accessing information, being able to share their experiences, and and understanding the processes in the district. What we would like to do, based on survey data, is work on some things specifically for CPAC, and some of those things involve working together with the district to make that happen. Specifically looking at making meetings and workshops more accessible to parents. The second one here, the survey results suggested that there's issues surrounding communication, and we know that that's ongoing and being addressed from multiple angles ongoing. One idea that we had was to possibly host a roundtable open discussion with administration and with parents where we figure out or just make sure that everyone knows what the processes and timelines are specific to this district. That way parents are up to speed on how all of that works, and they're able to have more productive, informed discussions, which, you know, eases time and stress for everyone.
Could I ask one question?
Yeah.
Going back a couple slides, it was the one right after the graph on the results of CPAC-related questions. And it was the recommendation, yep, right after that. Yep, the district could develop and enforce communication guidelines for staff members to follow. That next one, next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, click the right button.
How would this be different than the parents' rights?
The communication guidelines, you
Correct,
mean?
yes.
I think what we're kind of focusing on there is the actual communication within the district. So some of the feedback we've had, not specific, kind of supported by the survey, but in actual feedback from parents speaking of their experience, like the way that their emails are handled and the length of time between their responses and how
Okay, all right.
the quality
I
of
see
the
what you mean.
responses.
Okay. All right,
but-
so separate from the parent guidelines that,
Right, yeah,
okay,
not the
all right,
procedural
thank you.
safeguards.
I'm sorry.
What you would envision that looking like is something that a parent could take and refer to when they're experiencing things that maybe feel a little out of the ordinary. You know, like say you send an email and you're not hearing back, you send another email, you're not hearing back. It's a way for a parent to say, hey, what's that escalation point? You know, who do I go to next when this isn't resolved? Or, you know, an agreement between, say, I'll just use student services as an example. Maybe a team chairperson has to respond to a parent within 48 to 72 hours, right? And it may not be the answer, but at least acknowledgement of that email and that they're looking into it. That type of stuff. So that's
Absolutely.
a little bit different.
Great, thank you.
Oh, wait, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. No.
What's the number?
I think you're going the
You're
wrong
going
way.
too far.
Huh?
I think you're
going the
right.
wrong
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Going backwards.
Oh, that's right. I don't know how that's happening.
Right there.
This one?
All right, so these are things that we would like to continue working on or follow up on. Either we haven't had time to address them yet this year, or it hasn't come up in our discussions. One of them is just getting more information. The coordinated program review was wrapped up, and we just want to go over that, find out how it was things were addressed. And the next two deal more with establishing the PAC's duties related to programming. One being taking a look at the behavior policies specifically related to removing recess as punishment and how that relates to the PBIS. A decent percentage in the survey felt that their child's unique needs weren't understood, so we're wondering if maybe there's some kind of connection there, and we just want to take a closer look and see if there's some way we can help support the district in that. And then for out-of-district surveys, for out-of-district families, the survey supported finding more ways to include their children in the community, but we would really need some more information before we make a definitive statement on that. So looking forward, this has only been our second year being established. Last year we really worked on creating the PAC and building up membership. This year we largely focused on providing supports through the community and parent education. Next year we're recommending that the board really start on the solid foundation of working collaboratively with the district on the planning and development evaluation of special ed programming piece. Now that we're kind of solidified as an organization, we think that we can start working more productively on those things. Okay. So, whoa, I apologize. So let me just read this then. So this is our proposed budget for next year to meet all of our goals. MassPAC membership is $450. We are looking at, that would include the basic rights workshop. We'd like to offer 2 additional workshops through the Federation. The first would be $150 and the second would be $300. Those topics are based on survey results. And then we estimate that we would need around $600 for operational cost, and that would cover our activities and community outreach, totaling around $1,500 for our line item for next year.
What was the total? I'm sorry.
$1,500. So just want to share all of our contact information here. There's lots of ways to connect with us online, either looking on the website, or if you're on Facebook, you can join the Facebook group. It's open to the public. It's for sharing information. You can also contact the board through email for PAC Business. We offer private email for parents who are looking just for support and resources so that we can help point them in the right direction. I just want to reiterate that we do not provide advocacy services ourselves, but we do work on pointing parents in the right direction there. And we wanted to make sure we put out a thank you to Donna Newcomb and Amy Reese for all of their participation and the collaboration we've had so far this year. We're hoping to do some more, heading towards that working piece. We've done a lot of fun stuff, but, and then that wraps it up. This is what we've got coming up next. Our next business meeting is on the 28th. That's at 7 at the high school, and there is babysitting provided at that meeting. And our next workshop is on April 4th. That's at 7 at the public library, and we're going to be learning about executive functioning and how you can support your child at home. So thanks again for your time and allowing us this platform to represent parents.
Anybody have anything? Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I really can't say enough good things about this group. When you think about where we were at in September of, what year was that? 2017? 2017, I think so, yeah. And to where we are now, I mean, it's just been an enormous amount of work that this group has put in terms of reaching out to parents, the types of workshops that they've offered, and the community outreach to the schools, as well as providing those activities for kids at, I was at the Friendship Park when I saw the Zen Den, and it's just really, really nice to see that kind of thing available. I think it's wonderful that it allows parents to be able to attend these activities with both parents, kids, and their siblings, because they do have a place that they can go to be able to decompress or unwind that allows them to stay participating in the activity. So I think that that's been just a tremendous asset, so thank you for that. I also think the babysitting was a brilliant idea.
Well, and I can't believe I forgot to mention the free, because that's my favorite word. But they also we're having it at our workshops. We had it at the library where the kids could be in a separate room, not just at our meetings, but at the workshops, the IEP workshop. We could do it at Basic Rights and in the future, which is just going to be so huge. And the kids were in the library.
Did you see a big change in the turnout when you offered the babysitting, or?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
But I just think it's really speaks to how aware this group is of wanting to get people involved and doing whatever it is that they need to do to provide services for people so that they can be there and get the information and support that they need. So I think you guys have done a terrific job.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
We tried.
No, I want to say the same. I've been around since before this was all kicked off, and just amazing how far it's come. And that information and data is so close to the parents that you're getting. To get feedback directly from parents is incredibly useful, so thank you for doing that. The other comment I had is, you're going to come to the committee to ask for funding again, like you did last year? Okay, good. You absolutely should. Yeah. You should ask for more than you need.
Yeah, that's one of their.
Are we voting on it today?
No, it's part of the budget.
Okay. I'm totally on board, though. That's you have one.
Yeah, just to echo what John and Donna said, thank you for all the work. I mean, you kind of took groups that had become almost stagnant and kind of revitalized. I know at the beginning you said you wanted to make people know that you exist, and I think you've done a great job with that. And I think people know what CPAC is now, and all the different services you're offering. So I think that's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the workshops have, I would really like to make sure that we mention those on a regular basis because they're incredibly helpful. I mean, the ones that I've attended, I'm blue, by the way. I think Jay was blue, you're green.
Oh, yeah, I was kind of all over.
I think we were orange.
Yeah, so,
Linda and I were orange.
but really very helpful, I think, in terms of the information that's provided. And I hope that the turnout will continue to increase because I think it's a really valuable resource for parents, not only in terms of the information, but also being able to connect with other people who are seeking the same type of information.
Do you see parents from outside of Chelmsford come to the meetings?
To the workshops.
We haven't
Workshops.
yet, but this next one, there's a possibility of pairing with Maynard CPAC.
Awesome.
One of the presenters is involved with that organization, so.
Good exchange of ideas from different angles. It's
And
good.
these guys go out to other CPACs as well. So.
That's great.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Next thing's Hannah Fedona.
Yeah, well, we can get started.
Okay, so, next item on the agenda this evening was just an update about community notification of fundraising activity. This topic had come up over the last year or so with regard to, there's a lot of fundraising that takes place among, I see Hannah smiling back there. There's a lot of fundraising that takes place in our mostly middle schools and high school. It's really very high school dependent, around clubs and sports and things along those lines. And the question does come up from time to time with regard to, if one of our students goes to their house and they want to do a fundraiser, is it legitimate? We think for the most part it is, but there could always be an illegitimate activity going on out there. How do we actually track these different fundraisers? So I just wanted to show for you. In your packet, you do just have a printout, but it doesn't look as good as the live. So on our website, and I thought this would be good for the community to watch too if they're seeing this from home, so I'm on the main page of our district website, and I put it under community for the time being. If the group wants to decide to move this somewhere else, we certainly can. But if you go under community, and then you, I gotta do this here, hang on. Whoops. All right, so under community, if you scroll down to fundraising activity is one of the links, and you click on fundraising activity, there's a update. So there's an attachment that you can again click on. This will provide you with a list of all the clubs and all the clubs and athletic team fundraising activities that have been approved and endorsed by the public schools. So if you are at home, you're a parent, you're a community member, you want to see that, when you click on this link, and this is a link that we're going to update every week or so, just depending on, it's not automatic, but every week we'll update the list. And it kind of just gives you for reference sake, what particular activity is going on. So if someone does happen to come sell something to you, you can see that it's legitimate. So at the high school, for example, we put the team that's conducting the fundraiser. This happened to be a fundraiser from the band, the orchestra and the chorus at the high school. It was a citrus fundraiser that they ran this past fall. You have start and end dates to the fundraiser. A little description of exactly what the funding is going to go for when they actually do the fundraising, and a little description of the activity. And basically, the coaches and advisors are now inputting their requests for fundraiser approval online. It then feeds up to the appropriate principal to have them approve, or the athletic director to have them approve the fundraiser. That feeds into a sheet that will then basically update this web sheet every week or so. But as you scroll through it, you can see, the senior class had a fundraiser right down the line. So in your school committee packet, I want to just kind of show you where this was on the website so that you can get a sense of how we have this set up. In the future, we have the data. Again, it's in kind of an Excel spreadsheet based on the way the form comes in. So we can always manipulate this differently. We could add different fields and update it. But we wanted to kind of put it up there for starters, let it be out there, try to get some feedback from people, and go from there. But I just wanted to show you that we did get that accomplished. It is a link off the site, and again, for right now, it's under community. If people have a better idea of where it should go, I'm open to certainly moving it, but I thought that was a good place for the time being. Barbara?
Approved and endorsed by Chelmsford Public Schools. You? Principal?
Building principal.
Building principal, thank you.
Yeah. And what are the repercussions if there are groups that do fundraisers that don't get approved?
Well, I mean, technically, you mean like it's a legitimate, they just forgot to apply?
Right, they didn't apply, or they just,
My bigger concern would be like if there was, technically a group that didn't receive approval who was kind of raising money, but it wasn't going to a particular fund. So let's say there was a group of kids that decided they were going to go out and try to sell raffle tickets for something to make money for themselves as opposed to the club or the sport they're supposed to be raising for. I'm hoping this will help. Again, that's not a big concern of mine, but I'm hoping that this would alleviate that. As the schools are getting used to this, there certainly will be some kind of activity that someone forgets to apply online for. But when they do, and they go to do their churn-in for funding, the business office can also monitor this list so they kind of see what fundraisers have been approved. So if they see a churn-in sheet come in with cash or checks for a particular fundraiser, and it doesn't match up to something that's on the approved list, the first time they'll reach out to the club advisor and just let them know that they probably forgot and help them through the form. When they do apply, it'll get into the list. So the next time we update the list, that fundraiser will go on board. And I think it will take a cycle for people to get used to it. But it's more of a, just a way to have a little bit of compliance and then also notification. Again, something's going to slip through the cracks this first time, but at least we're trying to get it onto the form, and then we can update and consistently do a better job as we move forward.
Donna, anything, we just talked about the fundraising.
Yes, I
know
looked
you
at it.
Before.
Yeah, no, I really liked it a lot. I did have a little trouble finding it until I found it once and then I couldn't find it again. But now I know where to find it. So under community, right?
It's under community. That's what I just showed her on the board so people from home can even see it. And I said, I'm open if people have a better idea or like what makes the most sense of where to go get it. I'm not beholden to where it is. It just, for me, I figured if I was a community member and I was trying to validate whether something was happening or not, that'd be the place to go.
Absolutely.
But I'm open to ideas if people
No,
have.
community was fine. I was looking under business, and so I think that, I think that because you were managing the accounts, I just assumed that it would be under that, so. But I think community works.
The outside would think that, though.
No, they wouldn't.
You never know. But if you change your mind or you have another idea, I'm certainly open to it.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing that. I think this is helpful, you know, so at least if there is a fundraiser going on, people know who and why and,
Right.
you know, and that is approved, so. You know.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. Next update for you is just a couple of requests for proposals that we're currently working on between the business office and the facilities department and community education. Robin Adams, the new director of community education, has been working with Russ Hoyt, who's the director of preschool over at the Westland School, which houses community ed and the CHIPS program, around a couple of building improvements that they think would be worthwhile. As you know, we actually have developed a decent surplus in the community ed revolving fund, and we're trying to figure out ways to invest that funding to be beneficial to the staff and students at the school during the day. So 2 projects that we want to put RFPs out for to get some costs associated with them to see if it makes sense to move forward on. First project is to do some replacement of the playground and the playground equipment that they have over at the Westland School. As Robin indicates, most of the playground equipment was really designed for elementary to early middle school age children, 5 to 12, but the Westland School now serves preschool population up to early elementary school. So they would like to design a playground that's a little bit more accommodating to that age group, offers different sections of programming based on age, tricycle track, things along those lines. So they've worked with some groups that actually do playground improvements, put together an RFP, and we want to put that out to actually solicit some ideas and proposals from different groups to come in and give us some options to do some upgrades there. So again, when we put the RFP out, we didn't want you to get caught off guard, have people asking you, what are you looking for? I don't know exactly what the funding will be. That is probably a multi-$100,000 project to do a playground like that. We will work with DPW. They've been involved with the review of the RFP because there'll be certain elements that they will probably do within the scope, and then a firm would come in and do the rest. But that is in the works. The other item that is in the works is trying to get pricing on what it would cost to add air conditioning to the top floor classrooms at Westlands. The community education program works kind of year-round out of that building, but Summerfest, which is a big program for them, doesn't happen at Westland School because the building is just too hot in the summertime. The ground level floor actually stays pretty cool because some of the building is actually kind of underground. It's built into the ground. It stays cool, but the top floor with its 6 or 7, maybe 8 classrooms is very hot. So Summerfest typically moves to, it's been in McCarthy in the modulars in the past. Last summer it was at Harrington in the past, but it's a constant move of equipment back and forth. So they'd really like to be able to have a year-round home at Westlands. So we're going to go out to bid and see what it would cost to add air conditioning, again, just to the classrooms at the top floor of Westlands, not air conditioning for the rest of the building. But that would provide cooling spaces for the kids during the summertime if they're part of those programs. So that RFP is going to go out at the same time. Again, we would come back to you to award contracts, but we just, again, wanted you to know that in case you saw RFPs on the street or had people ask you what we were thinking about doing at Westlands. And again, being able to utilize some of the money that we have set aside in the community ed revolving fund to pay for that so that it wouldn't impact the local operating budget.
So all this would come from community ed funds?
The community ed funds.
And would they apply for any outside sources of funding or? Like from community preservation or anything like that? Or?
They technically could. I'd like to see what the dollar amounts are first that we'll come back to. And I know like the community preservation wouldn't pay for the air conditioning, potentially the playground area, but I know it is something that they actually want to try to do some improvements through this summer, so I don't know what the lead time on getting community preservation funds would be. If the project's something that they can handle within their scope, I'd be more apt to let them go ahead and do that and potentially look to go into community preservation for some upgrades at some of our other playgrounds. Byam received a nice playground last year. South Rose in very good shape. Center School really needs some improvements to their playground. So that might be one where we could go to the community preservation for. What was the other one? Oh, Harrington, and then Harrington got a new playground as well. So it's really Center School that doesn't have a good playground at this point.
Do we need to take any action on this? Is this just?
No, but you would actually take action on the contract. If we do get the proposals in and we move forward with the recommendation for a contract, you would then need to vote to approve it. This is really tonight just more for informational purposes. Unless you told me you're really just not interested in considering this, then we wouldn't go forward with the RFP. But I don't see a downside in going forward with the RFP and seeing what funding is involved and looking at this as an improvement if it makes sense financially.
I mean, I can't speak to the air conditioning piece, but I will say, I mean, the playground is in pretty rough shape. I go there 3 times a week to pick up or drop off my son. So I support it, and hopefully it comes back at a price that we can get it done.
Okay, good. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Okay, very good.
Next item on the evening agenda this evening is a vote to authorize me to submit a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for an accelerated repair at South Row Elementary School. So I don't want to confuse people. We are still putting together an application for a core program. So there were 2 different programs with the MSBA. Core programs are for larger school renovations, reconstruction projects, and that one is the one we designated the high school for. That proposal is due sometime in early April, and that is underway of being prepared. That is not the vote you're considering this evening. MSBA also has a smaller program called Accelerated Repair, which you can apply to even if you have a core program. That's our kind of priority program. But the Accelerated Repair program allows you to seek funding. We'd get about a 50% reimbursement for replacement or repair of roofs, boilers, doors, windows at schools. Speaking with Gary Prescott and DPW, there are 3 sections of the South Row roof, not the entire roof, but the section that is over the cafeteria and kitchen. There's a section over the gymnasium, and then the roof over the, what's the thing that runs in front of the school?
The
Like
overhang.
It's an overhang. It needs to be replaced. It's well in excess of 20 years, and we're experiencing some leaking. So we're putting together an application for the MSBA for that. It's only between a $250,000, $300,000 project. So likely, if approved, this wouldn't be something we would go out to bond with. I'd work with Town Manager Cohen. That might be a good use for end-of-year surplus money, free cash that comes back to the town. And if we're able to get a 50% reimbursement and only have to pay, $100 to $150, it just makes the project a little bit more attractive. Again, this is a quicker timeline, so this is due February 15th. We have to have the application in. You would review and approve this evening. We would go before the Board of Selectmen Monday night for them to vote to approve it because they have to also, and then we would submit. Typically, the MSBA timeline-wise would get back to us sometime late spring, ideally early summer, but that doesn't always happen, to move forward quickly on this project. These are projects typically they like to award and have completed within a year. So this would be something we'd be looking to potentially do even next fall if we were approved. There is specific language that's required in the vote that's before you this evening. I can read it, you can read it, neither one of us can read it, and we can just acknowledge the vote that's before you on paper. But that would be the vote you'd be taking this evening to approve it if there were no questions. And then again, after you approve it, we would move forward to the Board of Selectmen.
It's 50%?
It's ballpark. So our reimbursement rate is about 50%.
Okay.
There's a whole formula, and they have to, kind of certify us.
And they'll come back if you get accepted, and they just tell you, okay.
Right. But again, it's a project that we're going to have to do anyway.
Right,
So
we
why
should.
not try to get 50% reimbursement?
Do you want to just
Do you want me
take
to read this whole thing into the
That
minutes?
technically is the vote.
All right.
I mean, yeah, you can either read it, or we can just acknowledge it and have
Okay.
Sharon to cut and paste it into the agenda.
Having convened in an open session on Tuesday, February 5th, 2019, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the school committee of the town of Chelmsford, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated February 5th, 2019, for the South Row Elementary School located at 250 Boston Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority category or categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for the replacement of school facility systems such as roofs, as certain sections of the roof at South Row Elementary have exceeded their useful life and require replacement at this time. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Chelmsford to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Second?
Second, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions on this or comments on it? Okay, do we roll call or we do?
This would be a roll call vote.
Okay. Barbara?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0.
All right, thank you. So I'll transmit this over to the town manager to go on the agenda for next Monday night, and I available, so I'll plan to go to that meeting to seek their support as well. Okay. Next item on the agenda this evening, I'm sure everyone's been waiting for, is the recommended budget for next year. So we have been working very hard and long hours to put together a budget for next year, funding-wise. As you recall, in December, we had a tri-board meeting with the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the School Committee, where we talked about budget for the year. I'm going to review a couple of the different slides this evening. Thank you. I'm good. A couple of the different slides this evening, and then just kind of summarize the recommendations that I've included within this budget for your consideration. As you know, we're not going to have a meeting over February school vacation week. Good night. We're not going to have a meeting over February school vacation week, so the Tuesday we come back, which is the 26th, that will actually be our posted budget hearing date. Be open to the public. We'll receive public comment and feedback throughout the budget. And that will be the night that we actually kind of go page by page through the budget and discuss things. So without further ado, the budget book before you that I've handed you this evening, after our meeting tonight, will be available online as well. I have it queued up and ready to go, but you get the first look at it. So if you want to follow along and start on page 1 as you're flipping through the document, you're welcome to do that. A lot of this information is going to come directly from there. So the first slide is something we've talked about in the past, net school spending. And, you know, kind of where does Chelmsford stack up? And I'm going to speak in kind of general terms. I'm not going to get specific into some of the different numbers. But where does Chelmsford stand compared to other communities? And I think what you're going to find a consistent theme through most of these slides is we're right about in the middle. So when we take a look at statewide where we're spending, when we take a look at what DOE calls our comparable communities, they pick, you know, the 10 most like districts in the state based on our demographics, our size, our population, how we kind of stack up. And we typically fall right in the middle funding-wise. If you recall, when we take a look at academically how we perform, we typically perform at the top, or in the top third, but funding-wise, based on financial input, it's around the third. So of the 322 communities in the Commonwealth, we are 183rd, you know, close to the middle as far as spending is concerned. Net school spending, again, you have to think about 100% is technically the starting point, right? So everyone wants to spend their 100% net school spending amount. Then you talk about how far in addition or above net school spending communities typically spend. So you will find that Chelmsford last year in 2017, which is the number that was most recently published, we exceeded net school spending by 33%. Across the Commonwealth, the average school net school spending above 100% was 23.2. So there were 182 communities that spent less than Chelmsford and 139 communities that spent more than Chelmsford. So we're spending above the state median. But again, when we get into our comparable communities, we're right at the midpoint. So you are going to see some consistency there. When you take a look at our comparable communities, this is on the next page of the budget. Again, the DOE, because we've had a change in the academic assessment, the MCAS test, they have not published what our comparable communities for the current year are. So because they haven't done that, and I want to put this disclaimer there, I've taken the comparable communities from last year and gone through and pulled all their data, and I've compared us to the 10 comparable communities from last year. All right, there's no official list for the current fiscal year or the school year that we're in because they haven't put that out yet. They're still trying to figure out how they're going to compare districts, like districts as far as academics are concerned, so they have not done our actual 10 most comparable districts. Typically on our list of 10 from 2 years ago, 1 or 2 might drop off, 1 or 2 might come on board, but the vast majority of those districts are going to stay the same. Again, when you take a look at Chelmsford, our enrollment for, again, fiscal 17, 4994. We had 12.9% of our students were categorized as economically disadvantaged. We had 16.6% of our students identified with disabilities, or they have some type of an IEP. And what was really telling was our ELL number, 4.0. So 4% of our students were categorized as ELL. That was significant, and that is a number that kind of jumps out on this particular chart. You know, Chelmsford falls in the, when you look at our students with disabilities, Chelmsford falls in the top third of its most comparable districts. You know, of all Chelmsford Public School students, 16.6 have a disability and are on an IEP. Again, the 4% really is the number that jumped out for me on the ELL students. And economically disadvantaged, this is something to think about as well. 12.9% of all Chelmsford Public School students are identified as economically disadvantaged. So this is typically through free and reduced lunch forms that get filled out at all the different schools across the community. 12.9 might not seem like a lot, but when you actually just look back over the last couple of years, that number has been creeping up. So last year it was 11.2, and just as close back as 2014-15, it was 8.2. So we're jumping some pretty significant percentage points when you take a look at our total population of students who were identified as economically disadvantaged, which really has a direct correlation to additional service needs when it comes to the individual schools. So a lot of the work that we've been doing on our, our goal 1 for the district is really our academic focus. Goal 2 is all of our work around social emotional learning and providing supports for students. We put a lot of resources into Goal 2 because we do have a population that are really in need of those services. Stop me anytime you'd like. I'm just going to kind of hit through the slides, and I'm happy to answer questions before or after. So this next chart is, again, looking at 2017, what our actual net school spending was as a percentage of what the requirement was at the state level. So when you look here, of our 10 districts, there were only 3 districts that actually exceeded net school spending more than we did. Milton, Natick, and Wakefield. We came in again at 33%. That's why it says 133. All the way down to Melrose was only at 4% above net school spending. So, we're District 4 out of 11. If you take a look at the state average, again, I included that at 23.2%. Certainly it's good to be spending above the state average, but I want to highlight those numbers for you. Another indicator that gets talked about quite frequently is staff-student ratio or student-teacher ratio. Again, we're actually faring very well there compared to our comparable districts. So only 2 of our comparable districts actually have a better student-teacher ratio than we do, Billerica and Marshfield. What is interesting on this slide is the state average is actually slightly better than we have. We come in at 13.4 to 1. Across the state, all communities come in at 13. But we are better than 8 of our comparable districts, going all the way down to North Andover, who has the least desirable student-teacher ratio. Finances, one of our factors that often gets looked at is how do our average teacher salaries stack up among our 10 comparable districts as well as the state. And you'll find that we actually fall right in the middle on this one. Chelmsford's average teacher salary for fiscal 2017 was $74,592. Again, that's actually less than the state average. The state average was $78,008. But within our comparable communities, we have 4 that are above us and 6 that are below. So we're right kind of in the middle there.
What was the state average again?
State average was 78,708.
Oh, it's right there on the line. Thank you.
Yep, it's right there on the fourth line.
Got it. Thank you.
Per pupil expenditures. So this takes a look at your total budget and divides it by the number of students you have in district to try to figure out where we stand. And again, we actually stand right in the middle on this particular expenditure. So you've got 5 districts that are above us and 5 districts that are below us. We spent in 2017 for our students in district $13,335. Again, what I do note here is the state average spending on per student was just under $15,500. So we are a little over $2,000 less than the average spending statewide. Pretty significant, but again, we're in line within our comparable districts. So if you, so you're on the same page with me. Again, the budget is configured very similarly to the last 2-year budgets. So you have a summary sheet. You have individual category detail, which is your line-by-line listing of the budget. You have a staff salary book, which ties out as a crosswalk to the main budget document. And then you have several appendices, which we'll walk through in the end. But if you flip to page 8 actually will go through the budget assumptions that are included within this particular base document. So all of our programs and services that were offered during the current school year are offered next year, and these are enhancements to that. So we're going to kind of walk through that for you. The first thing that we have done is in the fiscal 20 budget, we have included all steps and lane changes that are known at this point in time. So if a teacher or administrator was on step 3 and they're going to return next year, they've been budgeted on step 4. If teachers or administrators have told us that they're, you're not double jumping, Ben, no. You get 1 step a year. So if teachers have told us they're in a program and they have a master's degree, but they're going to be going for an advanced degree, and we know that at this point, that's what we call a lane change. So we've accounted for that as well in the base budget document. We have about 10 or 11 announced teacher retirements for the coming year, and for budget planning purposes, we have budgeted those at master's step 3. So we don't know what we're going to attract for new people coming in from outside the district. Historically, we've found budgeting at master's step 3 gives us a little flexibility. You're going to receive some new teachers to the field that are going to come in at step 1, but we also don't want to be have our hands tied if there's a particular difficult subject matter, subject area to find. You want to be able to bring people in with some experience. That has happened historically with some of our special ed programs that need to be staffed. Certain sciences, it's very difficult to find, say, physics teachers, things along those lines. So we've allowed ourselves a little bit of flexibility on that front. All of our collective bargaining agreements are up June 30th, with the exception of our custodians, because they came on board mid-cycle. They were a new union that formed, so they actually have an extra year on their contract before their contract is up. But for all of our contracts that are up on June 30th, we have a line item in the budget which equates to basically a 2% cost of living increase built into the budget. Again, for budget planning purposes, the school committee, once the budget is approved and once you settle a contract, you have the ability to basically award and implement the contract. We don't have to go back to town meeting to have funding be appropriated to us. So again, coordinating and working with the town manager, in the budget you'll actually see a line item for about $880,000, which equates to what a 2% cost of living increase would be for salaries. We didn't sprinkle that through all the different salary lines. It's easier to track and to actually have within the budget in one singular line. Once contracts are settled, that money can be transferred to the appropriate accounts. But I did account for that within the budget. Next thing, you're going to see some additional positions and services that we're recommending for inclusion. Part of that is actually due to a net decrease in the amount of money that we need to budget for out-of-district special education tuition. So about a $600,000 decrease in out-of-district special education tuition costs. This is largely predicated on several students who are in out-of-district placements. They happen to be expensive out-of-district placements who are aging out of the programs this particular year. So they're not students that are going to be with us next year. So that is a good opportunity to be able to kind of reinvest in programming based on those savings within that particular line item. The other reduction that we have incorporated into this budget is continuing with the reduction of the two classrooms of the two strands at McCarthy Middle School. If you recall, 2 years ago, the McCarthy Middle School and the Parker Middle School are going to have a common number of classrooms. McCarthy used to, across the board, have 10 sections of every grade level. Parker had 8. 2 years ago, we reduced 2 fifth-grade classrooms so that they both had 8 and still stayed within the student enrollment guidelines. Last year, or the current year that we're in now, we reduced 2 sixth-grade teachers. So those sixth-grade kids are obviously going to go up to 7th grade, and we're going to reduce 2 7th-grade positions. Next year, we'll reduce 2 8th-grade positions, and then both schools will actually have a pretty symmetrical alignment of staff. They'll have 8 sections at each grade level of each program. So I am going to come back at the end once we're done talking about this, because this also does tie to some of the elementary programming and some of the elementary bubble classes. So we'll get to one of the appendices at the end of the presentation, but we did account for that reduction in this budget document. As far as some additions to the program, we are recommending the addition of a preschool classroom over at the CHIPS program at the Westland School. We have actually even begun this year. We've had some additional referrals, some additional increase in students at the CHIPS program. Mid-year, we've actually added a half-time classroom at CHIPS that's going to need to go to be a full-time classroom in the fall. So for this budget purposes, we've included a full-time teacher for that preschool program and two paraprofessionals to get the program started. So those costs have been included within this budget. We've also included the cost for additional transportation services, because with additional kids coming to the program, we also need additional either minibuses or vans to be able to transport the students to and from the program. So within the special ed student tuition line item, you're going to see an increase of about $99,000, and that's just a per vehicle per cost that's already built into our contract. At Parker Middle School, recommending a couple of additions. Parker had asked the last 2 years actually to increase or add an additional counseling position. So McCarthy Middle School has 3 school counselors. Parker has always had 2. When you take a look at the ratio of student to counselor, right now you have approximately 351 students to a counselor at Parker. And we would like to bring that more in line with McCarthy. Ideally, in the long run, we'd love to get that ratio closer to 200, but certainly bringing it down to 236 to 1 is a lot better than 351. We have, can I just finish my train of thought? Sure. Then I'll be happy to talk to you. Sure. We have talked back and forth at length for a year or two about social workers and where they might fit into our system. In having talks with the principals, we have Lorraine Wilson on board now as our coordinator of SEL, and she's doing a lot of work with the school counselors and whatnot. We've talked about our model and possibly being able to provide a different level of service or a different type of counseling service. We're not at the point where we're coming out to recommend, a wholesale change of positions, and I really would never do that. But what we do want to take a look at when we have openings or opportunities to possibly change service delivery or alter it or amend it in some way, we want to be able to do that. Having a discussion with the Parker Middle School and their counseling structure now, they have two school counselors. One deals primarily with 8th grade students and transition to high school and scheduling, a more traditional kind of guidance counselor role. The other does a lot of services that you would see typically from a social worker or school counselor, your lunch bunches and different groups and whatnot. But we actually would like to be able to try implementing a social worker component, to have someone with a skill set not only within the school for some of that work, but also who will have some ties to resources within the community, outside agency, referrals, things along those lines. So that is the recommendation. I know the committee has talked about adding a social worker for a while. Again, this is going to be kind of, which I think is good for us, targeted to a particular school so we can see how that individual in that role will work within our existing confines of, we have school counselors, we have psychologists. We'll now be able to add a social work component, kind of work through the model for the year at Parker, and then if we're successful, possibly be able to recommend, additional supports in future years. But that's the way that we're recommending taking a look at adding a social worker, but being able to kind of have it be a, not a pilot, but kind of a work in progress to figure out exactly how those roles will all work together with Lorraine's help and Amy's help, obviously. Sorry, Barbara.
No,
McCarthy's always had a larger population than Parker. Is that still the case?
No, it's actually coming down a bit. The gap between the two is consolidating. I'm going to show you the student enrollment slide at the end. It's one of the appendices because I want to also look at the elementary bubble classes at the same time. But you'll see that the numbers are actually becoming more similar.
Well, using your 236, well, we can use the 351 since that's kind of current. How many of the students, aside from the 8th grade, who are required to meet with their counselors to set up their schedules, how many students in those schools actually seek the services of the guidance counselors? I mean, there are 351. I can guarantee that there are students who don't see the guidance.
Oh, no, there absolutely are. The 351 is just, that's basically taking the total student population, dividing it by the 2 counselors.
Right.
What you'll see industry-wide is a standard that's closer to trying to get to a 200-to-1 counseling ratio. Even a 201, your 200 kids are not going to be seeing the counselor. It's kind of averages within the industry as far as like what a caseload would be, what a service delivery model would be.
Do we break down the type of services that a typical student, or not even atypical student, would receive from a counselor at the middle school?
You know, it's yes and no. And here's what's difficult about this. If a student is special education and on an IEP, in the service delivery grid, you may see services delivered by, say, a school psychologist right now. They may have consults, check-ins, things along those lines. Regular education students don't have kind of a service delivery grid, so it's very hard to track. So we just basically have kind of anecdotal evidence, and you know, if you talk to, say, Dr. Steve at McCarthy, he could tell you the kids that he's actually working with, you know, how many are kind of required by the IEP. But I think what we'll find is more and more students who aren't necessarily identified as special education are seeking the services of school counselors. And again, that's what's hard to quantify because I can't just go look at a service delivery grid and tell you how many kids or how many hours. Anecdotally, I can tell you that, and we certainly can get some follow-up information for you as we talk about this at the budget hearing, as far as like the caseloads and the number of kids the current counselors are seeing.
What I'm looking for, I guess, is a breakdown of students who would benefit from the services of a social worker, but not necessarily a guidance counselor, or students who may need more specific. A guidance counselor is kind of a general position. It's not a school psychologist. So a student who might need ABA or some services that are very specific that even a guidance counselor wouldn't produce. So who provides that service? ABA?
Well, I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to try to work through even with this modeling, because right now we have a school psychologist, we have a school counselor, the term is school counselor, but like guidance counselor type person, and the school psychologist is really doing more of the service delivery piece of the therapeutic piece at this point, because the school counselor typically doesn't.
Right.
The school counselor will have the you know, they'll still be conducting, like, you know, your small group check-ins, things along those lines. But most of the true counsel, I don't want to say, like the behavioral therapeutic type services are delivered through the school social work, school psychologist.
And one other question, just the assistant principal deals with
Everything.
Yeah, but specifically, if there's a behavior issue in the building, that usually falls on, it's a supervisory of students kind of role. Does the assistant principal fill that position?
Oh, yeah, I mean, and I was joking about everything, but they really are a little bit of everything. Yeah, they certainly play a role in student discipline, you know, operations within the building. Our assistant principals also, you know, evaluate our supervisors of students at the elementary and the high school level, do a lot of that, kind of just general supervision, say like within hallways, lunches, things along those lines. But you'll see the assistant principals obviously in that role as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'll try to pull some information together for you for when we have the budget hearing. But our thought process is this could be a great opportunity to kind of pilot this initiative, work through some of the roles, and again, I think it's going to bring the counseling, whether it was delivered by a psychologist or a school counselor, or in this case, a social worker, more in line with where they should be overall number-wise.
I think that I like the direction that we're moving in, but I would still like to see that presentation from Lorraine about the different roles of the support staff in schools. You know, what the school counselor does, some of the things, the activities they may be involved in at the elementary and middle school and high school levels. Because I think one of the things that we were trying to figure out as we were talking about social workers is what do we have and what do we need? And I think that we had talked about Lorraine coming in and doing a presentation.
Right. But in fairness to Lorraine, she's only been on for about a month. So I know, we got to give her a little time. But we wanted to
No,
just
I
kind of
agree.
let her,
Yes.
her kind of work that through. The other increase at Parker Middle School is they have currently a half-time special education teacher that's delivering services over there, but when you take a look at the caseloads for next year and even this year leading into next year, there is a need, bless you, for the position to move from half-time to full-time. So I have included money within the budget to increase the half-time special education teacher to full-time. Taking a look at the elementary level, we are recommending, and I've incorporated within the budget, funding for 2 additional assistant principals at the elementary level. As you recall, last year we added 2 assistant principals, so each school received a half-time, basically one person split between 2 buildings. This will actually allow enough funding for 2 additional assistant principals to be hired, so that each school next year can have a full-time assistant principal dedicated to their buildings. I think the 2 that we've hired, Jason and Betsy, have come on board and done a fantastic job. Every PTO meeting, every meeting you go to in the schools, even the principals and groups are talking about, that particular model and how successful it's been. And I think, there'll be some fighting over who, who stays at their schools and who goes. But I think it's been very, very successful, and I'm thrilled that we're able to add this. And again, this is a kind of a twofer. It's a person who is helping with Goal 1 and some of the academic focus in the schools, but it's also really helping with a lot of our social emotional Goal 2 goals within the schools. So I think that will be very well received. Another district-wide recommendation is, again, taking a look at restoring some of the positions that had been eliminated in the past. Linda's very happy about this. Recommending, and we've built into the budget, the reinstatement of a coordinator for world languages, however, with a twist. So the world language department is actually a smaller department when you look at the number of teachers that are involved. And one of the initiatives that we have really wanted to get off the ground is some kind of a more formalized exchange program for high school and even middle school students to consider. So we're recommending reinstating the coordinator of world languages, but adding exchange programs to the duties, and really being clear and deliberate about having this person be charged with developing and supporting and overseeing an exchange program for our students and being the point of contact for that. So that particular funding is included within the budget, and I think that's another great step to kind of remedy and restore our positions. This was, Amy actually brought this forward again. A lot of our savings is coming from special education and the fact that we have some savings within out-of-district tuition. We currently have a structure where we have 3 administrative chair people for the district. We have 1 chair that has 2 elementary schools that feed a middle. We have a 2nd chair that has 2 elementary schools that feed a middle, and then we have a high school chair. That is a very light staffing level. That's a pretty high student to chair ratio. We're recommending this, we still need to work through some of the fine points of this, but recommending an additional special ed chair be added. And in our first thoughts of this, we very much still like the alignment of the 2 elementary schools feeding a middle school, and then obviously the high school. This person might actually pick up and service a lot of the special populations within the district. So we have an ASD program at the BIAM. We have a life skills program at Center. We have an ASD program at Parker, like the individual classrooms that oftentimes don't have as many students as are in a full school, but their IEPs are a little bit more significant and oftentimes have a little bit more meetings and follow-up meetings and things along those lines. So we're thinking about pulling out those particular cases and having them work with a new chair. I do think this will also be responsive to some of the suggestions you've heard this evening around just, timeliness, being able to, meet deadlines, be available for consults, phone calls, things along those lines. It will help our ratio significantly. And I think by doing this, not only will the special populations be better serviced, but our regular special education students within the buildings as well, because again, it's going to provide that extra time to be able to service those cases. Non-personnel, taking a look at a few different initiatives. So we did include funding in the budget for our 101 technology initiative that we reported on. Bill Silva came to our last meeting and talked about. So this will actually involve utilizing school choice money, and when you get to that page of the budget book, you'll see that there's an offset to school choice of $75,000 to be able to outfit each of our incoming 5th and 9th grade students in the district with a laptop or a Chromebook that they'll use at home, they'll use at school. They'll keep that device for the duration of the time that they're in the district. So an incoming 5th grade student will get a new laptop. They'll keep that 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. They'll turn it in when they go to high school. They'll get a new laptop at high school. They'll keep that 9, 10, 11, 12, and then graduate. So this is, again, Bill, I'm not going to get fully into it tonight. Bill had reported on this. There was a lot of work that went into this in the recommendation. It's a lease type model. So basically we'll be adding to the base budget about $75,000 in year 1. In year 2, we'll still have that $75,000 payment to make, and we'll need to invest another $75,000 for year 2. So in the end, this is going to be a commitment after 4 years of a pretty much perpetual $250,000 to $300,000 line item within the budget. But every single student in the district, grades 5 to 12, will end up having a device. And every 4 years, there'll be a turnover, which I think is a pretty, it's a good timeline, it's timely. And I think it's an exciting venture for us. So I did build in funding in the budget for that. Go ahead, Barbara.
No, I'm way ahead, sorry.
Okay. A couple of other things that the committee has talked about, so I don't think you'll be overly surprised by this. But we have talked about clubs and activities and student activity fees. So we have a number of student service organizations, so your volunteer opportunities, things along those lines, or student recognition clubs, so National Honor Society. And typically these different clubs have always, you had to pay the fee to be part of them. So what we've incorporated within the budget itself is funding to be able to provide the stipends for the advisors for those particular clubs, the service clubs and the recognition clubs. And again, it's kind of odd or funny, I think, to say, congratulations on being in the National Honor Society. Now, pay the $100 fee and you can be part of the club. So we're going to change that. We built in the funding to be able to pay for that. In the budget in Appendix B, you actually have a chart that Joanna put together that shows, which clubs will be free, which clubs will still have a fee to them. But I think this is responsive to a lot of the questions and inquiries we've received from parents. And obviously the committee members, we've talked about this as well. So funding is included in the budget to be able to do that. Further, as we looked at the funding, we currently have a fee structure where a club at the high school is $125 and at the middle school it's $100 per child, and you can participate in as many activities as you'd like. We've built in funding in the budget to actually be able to lower that fee. So when we took a look at surrounding towns and what the different fees that they were offering, we were a little bit on the high end for some of those fees. So this budget includes funding, if approved, to be able to have a fee reduction. So the high school student activity fee in year 1 would go from $125 down to $100. It would drop $25. And at the middle school level, our fee would drop from $100 down to $75. So it's I could see this being a multi-year initiative to try to defer some fees. I think staff, obviously, and parents should be happy about that. We're on good financial footing. I think we can afford to do this at this time, and it brings us more in line with some of the other communities that we've looked at. Last fee that we're recommending eliminating at the high school is the parking fee. So this is something that, again, we've talked about for different times, so I don't think people will be too surprised by this. But we have a system in the district. We have busing. You have to pay, what's the matter?
My youngest is graduating this year.
Ben, I'm in the same boat. It is what it is.
It is what it is, Ben. It's good for everyone else. So what ended up happening is in our district, grades K through 6, we're required to provide student transportation if the child lives more than 2 miles from the school. We do that, and we allow students, if they live less than 2 miles, to pay as well. Everyone in grades 7 to 12 has to pay if they want to ride the bus. At the high school, you pay the $200. If you happen to mid-year, late sophomore year, junior year, if you were able to get a car, you can turn in your bus pass and basically get a parking pass for the high school. Or coming out of the gates, if you already have a car, you can just pay the $200. We've talked about this. It's kind of an extra tax, or it's an extra fee on families to do that. And I understand and I actually support the bus fee because we're providing we're providing a vehicle, we're providing a contract, we have to defer that. The parking at the high school is something I can see past because really, yes, we're providing a parking lot, but, you know, parents, and I know this myself, you know, they're buying a car, they're paying for insurance. I think if we can do this for parents, it was about a $33,000 offset to the budget. But again, financially, we're in good shape. We were able to work that into the budget, so we're not looking for that offset. And I think this will be well received by, again, parents and students at the high school who've had to pay this fee. Students will still have to register. So, you know, this, I don't foresee this being an issue right now just because of our enrollment, but in districts that actually don't have a fee and they exceed the number of available spots, then there's a lottery. You know, again, I don't see that being an issue because we've open spots right now. I'll work with the high school. We'll actually develop kind of a procedure or policy around this, bring it back to you at some future meeting to look at. But if we ever got to a point in time where, you know, we have more students requesting parking than we have, you may have to implement a lottery. And, you know, typically it starts with the older kids and works your way down. We'll come up with something thoughtful and bring it to you. But again, I'm not anticipating that being an issue. But the budget document you have before you includes enough funding to be able to waive that fee or reduce that fee. Right, not reduce it, eliminate that fee. So, so that has also been incorporated into the budget. Those are the highlights. So I think personally they're pretty significant. I think we have addressed a lot of our initiatives, our Goal 1 initiatives. We've reinstated some positions. We have targeted the positions that we've reinstated to really be school and program specific. We have taken into consideration really K-12 needs in the district. And I think these are some pretty significant steps to put us in a good direction going forward for next year. So I do want to hit a couple of the appendices, but are there any questions before, I'm happy to answer any questions on the document or the recommendations?
No, wait until next.
Want to wait? Okay. Give me 1 second, I just need to get my sheet up. My computer's exhausted from that presentation. It's taking a second here. All right, so a couple of things I'd like to point out to you. When you get through the budget itself, if you're looking at this, page 12, right, is technically, that is your summary level detail. So when we go through the budget, we're going to begin on page 13, and that is the individual kind of DESI approval of the budget. So you'll go page by page through, ask questions, you know, vote the bottom line of the budget. All of those line items basically feed up to page 12. And you'll see at the bottom of page 12, it ties out to a $61 million budget request for next year. That's the $2 million increase that the town manager recommended, and we did a lot of our budget work predicated on. These are the line items, once you approve the budget on page 12, that we live within. So, you know, we may transfer small sums of money within these individual DESI fund code budgets, but if we're going to move money from one account to another, or we're going to do a programmatic change, this is the budget accounts that we end up coming back to you for. So when we get together on the 26th, we'll start on page 13. We'll go all the way through the budget. And again, a couple things I want to point out to you as you go through the document, anything in red, you know, those are our offsets. So an example would be on page, say, 26. 26 is where we show an offset to the CHIPS revolving fund. So whenever you're in the document itself and you see a red, the parentheses designates a negative number, and so that is an offset. And we've done that throughout the document. On page 36, for example, is where you'll actually see the costs associated with the one-on-one technology initiative. And so you see a cost associated with the contracted lease, and then right below it, you actually see that would be offset to the school choice revolving fund. So again, we've been consistent on that. At the very end of the budget, page 48, again, is your tie-out sheet. That's just a check and balance sheet for me that shows that the final number adds up to 61 million. It cross-references the first sheet. And then page 49 starts your staff salary book. So that's basically your crosswalk of all of the personnel within the budget, the FTEs and the dollar amounts. So if you want to go back and forth and actually compare them, it's a nice crosswalk for you, and that just shows you where those numbers are coming from. So if you move to page 68. 68 is in Appendix A, and it is the student enrollment summary. And so this is a report that I had provided to you back in December. I think it was on December 18th. It was at that particular meeting. And I put it up on the screen just for the viewing audience. This is our October 1, 2018 class size. So this is, again, our certified numbers from the DOE. And the top part of this page basically just shows that we have the 4,961 students. It shows the distribution of the students across the schools. And then on the bottom part of this page at the elementary school level, we showed what the grade level enrollment was, and then we divided it by the number of homerooms to get an average class size. So this is information that was, again, provided back in December. The next page of the report showed the class sizes at the two middle schools. So you will see actually that the 369 is a higher enrollment. This last year's fourth grade going to fifth grade was a higher enrollment than usual. And at the McCarthy Middle School, we ended up with 200 students enrolled in fifth grade. But when you divide it by the 8 sections, it's about 25 students per class. Parker did have that particular year about 30 students less, so their class size was a little bit less. You'll see sixth grade was a little bit closer. It was only off by a couple of students. When we looked at the incoming fourth to fifth grade for next year, again, the disparity between the two schools was within 5 students. So it was not significant. The current 7th grade class the 6th grade class at McCarthy, which currently has 181 kids, or 22, 23 kids per class, again, is if you kept the 10 sections there, your average class size would go into the 17, 18 students, which really is just too low for middle school. If that drops to 8, you're going to be more in line again with 22, 23 kids in middle school class. We're making these changes not only at the middle school, but at the high school. We always look for, just under enrollment, under subscription, because we really do need to move some teachers. We're not looking to eliminate teaching positions, but we need to shuffle them based on where our population is at the time. And we actually really have the need at the elementary school level for more advantageous class sizes than at the middle of the high school. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have advantageous class sizes at the middle school or the high school level, but 22 and 23 students in a middle school or high school class is certainly within parameters, and it's widely acceptable. A lot of communities in our area would have it in the mid-20s to high 20s. So we're not sacrificing any instruction or class size at the middle of the high school by doing this, but we're really, trying to reshuffle and reshift some of our positions when we can down to the elementary grade levels. So this is a diagram I want to walk through. Oh, go ahead.
So just a quick question. So when, and I know this is a small number in the population, but does this account for IM children that are being split between the Parker and McCarthy? those numbers that are gonna shift?
That's already been factored in.
Okay, I mean, I think that's something, maybe it's not a budget discussion, but I think we should probably have a larger discussion about,
Yeah.
is that a problem, and is that something we want to look at?
Right.
Rectifying in the future, I think, but it has been accounted for next year.
No, I want to be clear. So that's one of the two kind of geographic issues we're looking at. We have that particular issue where it's really a number of streets. It's like a small little wedge out near the Byam district that basically feeds Parker instead of McCarthy. So we're still under the existing maps, or the existing configuration. So there is still a little wedge of streets that are feeding Parker instead of McCarthy. So I did not make any changes in this.
Okay.
So if you did make a change, that would have to be like a wholesale change that the committee would have to make.
Yep.
The other one that I'm looking at is that development down near Turnpike and Mill Road, because again, Center is being impacted because that is currently designated to Center School. But we have some capacity at South Row. So I'm considering bringing a recommendation to you that as new students reside and enroll there, that they actually be districted, potentially that whole development to South Row instead of Center. But again, I'm not at that point yet, but those are the two, kind of geographical changes that we're looking at student enrollment-wise.
And that would affect next school year if you were to do it.
Yeah, but people they're still moving in, so like they haven't registered or anything. So that's almost like the opportune time if you're gonna make a change like that before people kind of get roots and become part of that community, if that whole development can shift. But no, I have not factored that in yet either, because that would have to be a vote of the committee.
For a vote, okay. Again, it's not really a budget discussion, I just wanna make sure we're continuing to talk about it.
And what we can do is actually isolate the number of students without looking at the actual students, but the number of students
That was a question,
who are in that kind of little wedge, and figure out exactly how many we're talking about and what the effect would be.
Okay, perfect.
If you were ever to move that, I would probably recommend doing some kind of a grandfathering of existing kids who are already enrolled, and then almost like a voluntary type thing for a year or two, because you might have a sibling who's already enrolled at another school, and if you make a hard line, then you have a family split, one going to one to the other. But I would bring forward recommendations for you on that.
Thank you.
No problem. So I sat down with the elementary principals last week to take a look at our bubble classes. So this is on page 70. So historically, we every year kind of take a look at our enrollment at the elementary school grade levels. And we're really concerned, and we want to have a focus be on, K1, 2 being as desirable a class size as we possibly can. Trying to keep those class sizes in the 20 to 23, 24 range, not having them be in the 24 to 26 range. That at the third and fourth grade level, again, if a class were to be 24, 25, it's certainly acceptable, particularly as the kids are getting ready and prepared for middle school. But we want to put a focus, if we can, on the K1, 2 grade levels to be able to have the most desirable and the lowest class sizes we can. So we obviously don't know at kindergarten what our enrollments are going to be yet. We had a good enrollment in January. We have another enrollment in April, but we're still waiting to see exactly what those numbers are going to be. So I may have to come to you with a recommendation after the April enrollment about adding a class of kindergarten at one of these schools, because we don't want to start out the year too high. We were a little bit of a pickle last year, quite frankly, because at the end of enrollment in the spring, we were fine going into the summer. And it really wasn't until August that we had an onslaught of registrations, which, kind of adversely affected the center numbers in the kindergarten. But at that point in time, it was a little bit too difficult. We had several meetings to talk about what to do. We ended up adding some extra paraprofessional support, but to add a whole teacher and break up existing classrooms really just wouldn't have been conducive to anyone at that point in time. But we obviously want to make corrections where we see that there are needs for corrections. So in sitting with the 4 principals and taking a look at the enrollment for next year, what we have targeted or kind of identified as areas needing bubble sections are the classroom grade levels that are highlighted in yellow. And then what I've done down below is basically on each of those grade levels that are highlighted in yellow, I've just included a factor that basically takes the total number of students. So if you take the top Byam block, which is 100, down below, you divide it by 5 sections instead of 4, because that's the bubble, you end up with an average class size of 20. If you kept the 4 sections, your average class size would be 25. So what we're recommending at this point in time is basically the yellow designated classrooms or grade levels be designated for the bubble classrooms for next year. Again, this keeps with the K1, 2, having the most desirable numbers that we can. K, again, we don't know yet. First grade, if you look right down the line, you'll have a low of 19.6 to a high of 23.5. In second grade, you've got a low of 20 to a high of 24. And then when you go to third and fourth grade, again, I think we can afford to have a slightly higher class size, although it's not that much higher. Third grade class sizes would go to a low of 20 to a high of 24, 25. However, I will say that 99 basically has been a 4-section for the last 2 years. So that's been 4 sections of kids. It hasn't been 5, moving right along. And then in fourth grade, again, you'll have a low of about 20 to 21 to a high of 24, maybe 25. We don't see a lot of movement in the district after like second grade and on. So we used to never be able to predict what first grade was going to look like because we didn't have full-day kindergarten and kids would be coming in from private kindergartens or home settings and things like that. We have full-day kindergarten now. We have a very good handle on the number of students who are moving up to first grade, so we're not surprised by our first grade numbers. The only activity we're really seeing 2, 3, and 4 are the traditional move-ins. So if someone buys a house and moves in, they might come, but then someone else is selling a house and moving out. So you're not seeing major fluctuation in your 2, 3, 4 numbers. It's really your K1s where we're seeing a little bit of fluctuation. But at this point within the budget document is incorporated these bubble classes for next year. And then what my recommendation for kindergarten is, again, we're not recommending any further reductions at the elementary schools or the middle schools. The only reduction really is those, the 2 strands, 2 classrooms at McCarthy. At the high school, they're still early on in the process. The students are still selecting courses for next year. But we'll be working with the high school administration to take a look at class sizes at the high school. And if there's an ability to make a reduction that wouldn't adversely affect students, we will bring that recommendation forward to basically be able to then reallocate staff to kindergarten if we end up having those needs come April and May as students enroll. So again, there are no reductions built into this at the high school right now, but once they're completed their process, which hopefully will be around the February vacation time, if we find that there are opportunities to be able to reduce and reallocate that staff member to a different grade level, we'll bring that back before you. That's kind of my hold on what will help us with the K numbers if they end up coming in higher than anticipated.
Facility-wise, can we accommodate these bubble classes?
Yeah, for the most part, Byam and Harrington traditionally have. So they have been okay in doing that. South Road just has never had to. It is going to be a little tight at center because even though we added the modular classrooms, we really just added 4 for the fourth grade. They do have other rooms that are being used, like large classrooms that are being used for like smaller special education breakout spaces. They're probably going to have to be reconfigured to be full classrooms. So staff are going to have to move around a little bit. And the other thing that we do look at is trying to have continuity within the layout of the building to say have all of your second grades be close proximity. You don't want to have one on one side and one on the other. So there might have to be some shuffling of rooms to be able to accommodate, and then that's a yearly basis because you've got to move your room around. But I think this goes a long way in kind of addressing those higher than desired class grades, particularly at K1, 2. And this is an annual thing. So we have to do this kind of annually to see where our resources are best going to be allocated to be able to do that.
Thank you.
The other one I wanted to point out to you as we talked a little bit about, so that was Appendix A. I won't pull it up, but Appendix B, which is on page 72 of the book, just for your own sake, you don't have to do anything with this now, but just for you to look at. This is just a nice chart Joanna put together that basically would have the left column, once the budget is approved, these would be no student activity fee, and they currently don't pay a fee because these are all clubs that people participate in. If they're part of a regular program during the school day, it's like an add-on type extension. The second one are the ones that we're proposing no activity fee for. So within the budget document, we've included funding for these advisors, so that these would technically be free clubs for the students. And again, these are your student service clubs, and these are your kind of by invitation only type clubs. And then the last column on the right would be your traditional clubs that kids our students continue to pay the fee for. However, it is a reduced fee from 100 down to 75. So I thought this is broken out nicely to be able to be shared with the staff. And obviously, this list can be amended as clubs, come and go or whatnot.
So that's just at the high school?
Yeah.
Similar type of things at the middle school?
They really aren't. I am going to talk to Kurt and Jeff again and make sure that we're not missing something at that level. But, no, they don't have like honor societies and things like that at the middle school level. Appendix C is the grant breakdown that Joanna had provided to you. That's similar to last year. And then Appendix D is, again, your chart of all your revolving and other funds. And you'll see that we're in good shape as far as all of our funds for next year.
Just in terms of grants, and I think you've answered this before in previous years, but we're constantly looking for grant programs and trying to scrub and figure out what we can apply for additional money. I mean, do you have a position for that, or is that just?
We manage that. You have to also remember there's different grants out there, but somebody has to manage the grant, and it has to be a grant that we're gonna actually use. So you can apply for a lot of grants, but then somebody has to actually see the project through.
Gotcha.
But a lot of that either falls under, between Joanna, myself, Kelly Rogers, special ed.
Okay.
So we do all the entitlement grants, definitely. But additional grants, like you might find some, grants for, like, say, robotics, or they get issued a grant for another program from, the different departments, they'll manage that grant.
Okay.
They just have to align with your mission,
What you're
too,
doing.
because you don't want to just apply for a grant just to get money if it really isn't like synced with something you're doing, because it is a lot of staff time and effort
Sure.
to do, say, a new initiative if it wasn't planned.
But we're just evaluating and seeing what's out there and see if
Oh,
things line
certainly,
up.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is the presentation for this evening. I do have a few extra paper copies of the budget. If anyone in the audience would like to take one, you're certainly welcome to have one. After the meeting this evening, this will be on the district website as the recommended budget with all the accompanying backup. Just need a few minutes to have that go live so that the public can view this. And then anyone is welcomed and encouraged to attend the budget hearing on Tuesday, January 26th. Hear the discussion. Well, again, I anticipate we'll go page by page through the budget, ask questions. I do urge you and encourage you that as you go through the document, if you have any questions or you want additional information on any item, if you just email me or tell me ahead of time, I'm more than happy to pull that together for you so that we don't get to the budget hearing and then you're asking for information. Not that you can't, but that's going to hold up the review and approval. So anything you want ahead of time, reach out to Joanna, reach out to me. Linda loves to get your calls as well.
Love it.
And, whatever we can do to make the process go smoother, we're certainly happy and willing to do that.
Very good. All set? Okay. All right, so last thing is we have a field trip?
Yeah, we have one field trip. I don't have it in front of me.
Parker, New York.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the 8th grade class trip from the Parker Middle School going to New York City on June 5th, 2019. Recommend approval.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Parker Middle School 8th grade class field trip to New York City on June 5th, 2019.
Second.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. All right, any liaison reports? Very good. Quiet time?
Yeah, quiet time, they're transitioning. I have McCarthy tomorrow night, if anyone would like to join me. It's a fun place.
And I just wanted to mention, we did have our public forum last Tuesday, and that went well. I think we had about 30 people in attendance. Good dialogue, good questions. So, I think that went well. Talked about different scheduling options and.
I have a question about that. Of the topics that we covered, the blizzard bags, the earlier start times for the high school and possibly later start time for the high school, possibly earlier for elementary, and what was the third?
Vacation consolidation.
Vacation. Does the school committee have a vote on those 3 topics? Are those policy issues?
Yeah, well,
I mean, technically, they're your decision? Do we need to approve
No,
those?
I mean, it's not even like mine. Like, I would bring a recommendation to you. You would need to vote and approve it, but all of them are tied to basically bargaining obligations too. So the way I took that public forum was more to just get community input from parents of the community around the topics to see if there's interest. If there is interest, then we would have to go back and actually talk to the employees who would be affected, largely the teachers, the paras, things along those lines, see how they feel. But several of them are a negotiating item. So it's not like even if I recommend it, you can just approve it and we do it.
Right. So they would exist within the bargaining unit discussions as an item that needs to be agreed
just
upon?
depending if we're at the start of negotiations, they potentially could be negotiation topics. Or if they're not, and you decided after the fact and the contract was already settled, then you'd have a duty to bargain, like
So
impact
it's an
bargain.
approval of a collective bargaining agreement?
You'd have to reach agreement with the union
Yeah.
to implement.
Okay. I was just trying to understand where it fell. Is it policy, but it's collective bargaining, which goes to budget?
Well, I mean, some of it may be policy related, but you can't put a policy in effect
Right.
that's gonna violate a contract.
Right.
So, again, I took it as like a first kind of conversation about just kind of where people thought about it, just to get some feedback. Linda and a group of people are looking at some of the different options, but, no, whether I brought it as a recommendation or you brought it forward, before it was enacted, you'd have to negotiate.
Okay.
I think we talked about as one of the first steps too, in these processes was to send out parent and staff surveys.
Right.
All right. Any new items people would like? Okay. Anybody who would like to come forward with any public comment? All right. I will then entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
4-0. Thank you very much.